Frith, what do you make of this? Are you a proponent of this fear project, or do you think that they reflect reality?
I think they reflect a very real threat that we're facing, and far from it being Project Fear, this is the advocates of a deal that we're facing. I take the point that they don't model on what we're going to be voting on, but they are saying any version of this or worse version of this have dramatic, huge impact on people's jobs. And this is, for all the talk of sectors being hit, this is people's prospects, this is people's standard of living, this is people's paycheck. And I think it's really complacent to write this off as Project Fear, when actually it's the advocates of the PM's deal that are saying, well, our deal's pretty bad and it is the worst of all worlds, but actually there are worse options still to come. And I think that's the position we find ourselves in.
So you represent a Leave majority seat, but you'd also accept that whatever numbers come out of a GDP computer, people didn't vote solely on this. And so, or this was said before the referendum too, and worse in some cases.
People didn't vote to be worse off, and when you consider
people voted in the knowledge that the government thought that they'd be worse off.
I don't think anyone would predict the last 2 years, or predicted that the last 2 years of shambolic behaviour of this botched deal. The Prime Minister's tour is 2 years too late, frankly. She's not seeking to have united the country in the process of doing this deal. She now wants our buy-in on a deal that no one's been involved in negotiating, and that's not an acceptable position to be in.
Let's discuss what was a very interesting Prime Minister's questions, I think. Something different there, something in Jeremy Corbyn's porridge, certainly, that he's got plenty of material to work with in this current sort of crisis era. You're smiling.
I'm anticipating a brilliant question.
No, well, let me... Well, why... It's a bit of a sort of coalition of... I mean, you're going along with Mark Francois' criticism of the Prime Minister, but when push comes to shove, you're risking no deal, which you've got the figures in front of you now. Why are you risking no deal?
It is within the gift of Parliament to determine there is no deal, no deal. Amber Rudd has said herself...
Is it?
Absolutely.
How?
Labour Party's position is that we'll work across Parliament to ensure it requires legislation, but Parliament... We cannot go into a Brexit conversation that talks about taking back control, but forfeits any suggestion of us as a Parliament determining what we do now or next on this matter.
Right, you weren't an MP back in 2015, but your colleagues, including the Romanian ones, including some that now want a second referendum, voted through Article 50, knowing full well that at the end of 2 years the treaties cease to apply. But how can they now say, we don't want no deal?
We will be in new territory if this deal falls, which we expect.
But they've already given their consent to no deal, have they not? I mean, people did say this, and I'll say again, you weren't there at the time, so you can take a pass on this one to some degree. But plenty of your colleagues that now argue for a softer Brexit or no Brexit at all gladly walked through the division lobbies to trigger Article 50, knowing full well that 2 years on, the EU treaties ceased to apply by international agreement. Were they wrong?
That's a fair summary, and you're right that I wasn't there. What I'm facing is where we're at now, and the idea that it's her deal, Prime Minister's deal, or a no-deal scenario is a confection. It's not.
Well, it's the legal reality. It's the constitutional reality.
It's not a choice. Parliament is not without its
you could argue
the remit
it's not a political
on this.
choice. I'll just finally, to wrap up, a fairly eventful Prime Minister's questions. James Frith, I mean, does this change the game, though? Surely anyone that believed this stuff will believe it, and if they don't believe it, they don't believe it. You have a Leave voting constituency. Nobody's going to be reading this stuff.
I think over the last 2 years, the realities of Brexit have been compared to the rhetoric of Brexit. The rhetoric that we still hear from Mark and his colleagues, long-standing tradition in the Conservative Party, but the ERG is a long way from where the majority of the people I speak to in Bury North that voted Leave are. And those realities are of the damage to people's livelihoods and the prospects in towns like mine. And I think people will read these figures in great concern and in detail and begin to reflect on what needs to happen next, because this deal is the worst of both worlds. It's why I won't be supporting it.